Heathrow's third runway cleared for takeoff, but it's in for a bumpy ride. After years of delays, the government says it's a truly momentous decision.
It's also the clearest sign post the referendum that this country is very clearly open for business.
But one Tory MP resigns in protest, forcing a by-election.
It is our chance to send a message to government and to Heathrow via the ballot box. And so I'm asking you to give me the mandate I need to continue fighting this fight.
Also tonight, demolition work begins at the Calais migrant camp in France.
4 die in an accident at a theme park in Australia. And
fake tan and the hair extensions, and
yeah.
I love it all, mate.
So natural.
I love it all.
I am natural.
The Essex girls campaigning to ditch those derogatory dictionary definitions.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mary Nightingale and Mark Austin.
good evening. The government hailed as truly momentous its decision today to end years of delay and approve a third runway at Heathrow. Theresa May said it proves post-Brexit Britain can be an open, successful global country. But rifts have quickly opened up within Conservative ranks.
Yes, it looks like there's trouble ahead. In fact, it's already started. Tonight, Zac Goldsmith resigned as a Tory MP, forcing a by-election over the issue. And Boris Johnson called the plan undeliverable and said he thought it would be stopped. Our Deputy Political Editor, Chris Shipp, reports.
Planes were taking off from the 2 runways at Heathrow this afternoon. A third is tonight, a step closer. Most people will know, however, that this story goes back not just years but decades. And in this post-Brexit world, ministers have decided the UK needs to connect to new trading partners, Vietnam for example. So they chose Heathrow over Gatwick.
You have chosen in Heathrow the most expensive, the most environmentally damaging, the most politically risky scheme, and many people want to know why.
This is a really big decision for this country, but it's also the clearest sign post the referendum that this country is very clearly open for business. We've thought long and hard about this. The committee considered all 3 options. There were 3 very good options on the table, but we believe a third runway for Heathrow is the best option for our future.
A third runway for Heathrow will be mostly funded privately at the huge estimated cost of £17.6 billion. Public consultation begins in the new year. MPs vote on the proposals by the winter of next year. So even if everything goes to plan, a new runway would not open before 2025. But the chances of everything going to plan are not great. One problem, the Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson.
Are you still going to oppose Heathrow, Boris?
But he and other colleagues now have permission to continue opposing the decision.
I'm afraid to say, I think that Heathrow in the long term is not in the right place, and I'm afraid a third runway is undeliverable.
It is quite frankly extraordinary that Theresa May's Foreign Secretary here at the Foreign Office can say those words about a project to which she gave the green light just a few hours before. And other ministers may soon be about to join Boris Johnson. It rather goes to highlight just how politically fragile this whole situation now is.
Add to that the resignation tonight of the Tory MP Zac Goldsmith. At a school in his constituency in the last half hour, he announced he was honouring his pledge to trigger a by-election if Heathrow expansion were ever approved.
As you know, I have to honour my promise. And so I've resigned as your Member of Parliament, and I'll be standing in the by-election as an independent candidate.
Theresa May herself once opposed a third runway, but now says it's needed in the national interest. If the runway is ever built, she may not be the Prime Minister when the first planes take off from it. Chris Shipp, ITV News.
So quite clearly there are contrasting views about the decision, not only from politicians but from people and businesses up and down the country. But it's been a grim day for the thousands of residents living close to Heathrow Airport who face losing their homes and livelihoods. Our consumer editor Chris Choi is there tonight. Chris.
Mark, yes, as the early evening flights taxi and take off, behind me are perhaps the best known strips of tarmac in Europe, and wherever you are around the country, it's likely you'll have been here. But the impacts, both good and bad, of today's decision go far beyond the boundaries of Heathrow.
Today's protests were the first sign of how lives and livelihoods could be affected in different ways around the country. First, residents. Almost 800 homes are now threatened by demolition. A £2.6 billion compensation package has been planned for those impacted. Much of this village will end up under the runway tarmac. Harmondsworth residents have spent years tortured by the indecision. Now this woman faces losing her home.
You're talking about history, you're talking about people in their 80s and 90s. Many of them, their families lived in this community, and their homes and their memories are going to be destroyed.
They are promising generous compensation.
I'm not interested in compensation. I find it absolutely insulting that people think that they can come in, bulldoze our home, bulldoze our villages, and that we're just happy to take money and run.
Also at the forefront of effects are the airlines. Currently, there are 480,000 flights in and out of Heathrow every year. After expansion, that would increase to 740,000. But BA's boss warns that the cost of the runway should not be passed on to airlines in higher charges.
It's in nobody's interest to see these charges go up. The only people who will benefit if Heathrow charges increase are the shareholders at Heathrow.
What about these charges coming down? Do you think fares will decrease because of today's decision?
No, I don't think so. Heathrow is already a very competitive airport.
From far beyond the southeast of England, there has been business reaction. It's claimed the new runway will boost the UK economy by £211 billion and create 77,000 jobs. In Wolverhampton, this business imports seafood from Asia.
It opens up the opportunity in different parts of the world, but it also gives us more capacity through our own factory.
But as light begins to fade over another day at the airport, it's clear there'll be many more before this new approval becomes action. Chris Choi, ITV News, Heathrow.
Well, let's go to our political editor, Robert Peston in Downing Street. Now, Robert, as Chris Choi was saying, the decision may finally be made, but there's an awful long way to go, isn't there?
There is, and the politics of this are extraordinarily balmy. I mean, we've got a foreign secretary allowed to say that he disagrees with this important policy. We've got an education secretary, Justine Greening, who's also been licensed to say she doesn't want the runway. Today, we've seen Zach Goldsmith resign as an MP, but the Tories will not challenge him when he runs as an independent. Some would say, what happened to party loyalty, to party unity? Now, very important political moment since 2003 when a British government first said they wanted a third runway. Successive prime ministers have dithered. Theresa May, has said she wants this runway, although as a constituency MP she didn't want it. But there's so much to do before the formal thing starts of, shovels in the ground and the construction starting. We've got a consultation, we've got a parliamentary vote, we've got planning, and there are going to be endless legal challenges. I absolutely don't believe it'll be open for business in 2025. Boris Johnson says he thinks it'll never be open. He may not be wrong.
Robert Peston in Downing Street, thank you.
Now, piece by piece, the authorities in Calais have today started to dismantle the migrant camp known as the Jungle. But as our correspondent Martin Geisler found out, some inhabitants are determined not to give up on their dream of reaching the UK.
It was unceremonial, but hugely symbolic. These pictures of workmen tearing down the notorious jungle camp will play well with much of France. The source of protest and problems for years, it should be gone by the end of this week. But they're demolishing the dreams of the migrants and refugees who have used this place as a base in their bid to get to Britain. There was disappointment here today, rather than real anger, but it's unlikely everyone will go quietly.
Problem. Maybe fight. Really. Because police cannot come in, take live people like that, man.
Meanwhile, the redistribution process continues. Almost half of the camp's residents have now been taken to centres across France. But many others have simply slipped away, hoping to take their chances elsewhere. Of course, some of those living in the jungle don't want to leave this part of France. They don't want to stop trying to get across the Channel. And this morning, police were called to this forest just outside Calais after reports that a group of migrants had moved here and set up camp. And there are other formal settlements along this coast full of people desperate to get to England. This camp in Dunkirk is home to 1,000 mostly Kurdish migrants. Hashem told me his wife and daughter made the crossing in the back of a lorry last month. They're now in Liverpool, and he says he won't give up until he's with them.
What would you do if they closed this place, like they closed the jungle?
I have to try it in the other place.
Keep moving?
Yeah, keep moving.
And keep trying to get across to England?
Crossing the border, that's it.
The authorities here are happy. The demolition of the jungle has gone well so far. A political success, certainly, but a practical solution is still a long way off. Martin Geisler, ITV News, Calais.
Here, a woman who was one of the victims sexually abused as a child by an imam at a mosque in the West Midlands has been speaking to ITV News about her ordeal.
Her abuser is on the run, thought to have fled abroad after being granted bail as he awaited sentencing for his crimes. Sejal Karia heard the woman's distressing story.
He was a respected religious leader of his local mosque, an imam trusted to teach children the Muslim holy book. But Hafiz Rahman was convicted of abusing 2 young girls. And just days before he was due to be sentenced, he fled to Bangladesh. One of his victims, Nabila, not her real name, told me she feels the justice system has failed her.
I've waited 30 plus years for this verdict and I finally get it, and he just seems to just walk out the country, no questions asked. And I'm left just wondering why, who's to blame, what's going to happen, but nothing.
The abuse happened at this mosque in the West Midlands in the 1980s when the 2 victims were just 6 and 7. 3 decades on, and Nabila is still living with the scars.
Purely because of him. I've disfigured my face and my body over the years just so that he didn't think I was pretty or nice.
In a statement, West Midlands Police told us all ports were put on high alert after he'd escaped, and they added the court did not issue any warrant for Mr. Rahman to be arrested or remanded following the guilty verdict, and he was due to be summoned for sentencing this week. But Nabila feels after being robbed of her childhood, she's now being robbed of justice.
He's stolen a lot from me. They say that he's stolen my innocence. I was thinking about things and doing things as a child that I shouldn't have been doing. And I was exposed to things that I should never have seen.
Nabila now has a family of her own, but the scars of the past have yet to heal. And for that to happen, she needs her abuser behind bars. Sejal Karia, ITV News.
Still to come on the ITV Evening News.
It's Carlos Alberto. Oh, what a great goal that
It was. Carlos Alberto, scorer of Brazil's greatest World Cup goal, has died.
And the Essex girl campaigning to change the dictionary definition of Essex girls. Find out why, along with the rest of the day's news, after the break. Jonathan.
Welcome back. 4 people have been killed in an horrific accident at Australia's biggest theme park. It happened when a raft on a river rapids ride, described as a family attraction, suddenly flipped, crushing 2 men and 2 women. The park has been closed while investigations are carried out. Juliet Bremner reports.
The upturned ride is screened off to conceal the horror of an accident that claimed the lives of 4 people. They were sitting on the same raft on the Thunder River Rapids ride when it flipped over. 2 were thrown out, the others trapped. Their injuries caused by the mechanism of the conveyor belts.
We saw this daughter cry and we think it was her mum that was involved in the accident. Seeing people running around and evacuating the whole area, we knew it was bad as soon as we saw it.
The thing flipped and obviously there were kids on board screaming while their mum was trapped under.
The victims include 32-year-old Kate Goodchild. Her husband was watching with their 18-month-old daughter. Kate's brother Luke and his partner Ruzi Aragi were also killed, along with a 42-year-old woman. The ride is only classed as a moderate thrill. But according to members of the public, there had been problems earlier in the day. Clearly shocked, the Prime Minister promised to search for an explanation.
It is a very sad day, and we trust that there will be a thorough investigation of the causes of this accident over the days that follow.
After the deaths were confirmed, visitors were asked to leave Dreamworld. Forensic investigators will need to establish how a family day out ended so tragically. Juliet Bremner, ITV News.
Here, a tribute left by Prince Charles to mark the 50th anniversary of the Aberfan disaster has been stolen. The Prince of Wales laid a wreath in the cemetery where the 144 victims of the disaster are buried. But the card he left is now missing, and South Wales Police are investigating.
And Labour's ill-fated Ed Stone from the 2015 general election has delivered one final humiliation. The Electoral Commission has fined the party £20,000 for failing to declare all of their expenses, including the full cost of the 8-foot tablet. Labour says it regrets the errors.
Now, forget Maradona's hand of God, even Jeff Hurst's famous World Cup hat-trick, because the death has been announced today of the player who scored what many believe to be the greatest ever World Cup goal. Our sports editor Steve Scott now on the legendary World Cup winning captain of Brazil, Carlos Alberto.
In sport, there are only a few where were you moments scattered through the decades. In the 1970 World Cup final, Carlos Alberto helped create one of those. A near-perfect goal involving almost the entire Brazilian team, a team still judged by many as the best ever to play the game. Alberto was their captain.
Oh, it's not a bad ball for Pele on the right side. It's Carlos Alberto. And what a great goal that was! Carlos Alberto.
Lifting that trophy was the highlight of his playing career. The goal he's been asked to describe countless times.
Before Pelé stopped the ball, Pelé saw that I come, and then he stopped the ball and wait for the right time to give the ball to me.
As a manager for more than 20 years in Brazil, he added to his many trophies before trying his luck abroad with coaching jobs in Nigeria, Oman and finally Azerbaijan. Since then, he's been a pundit on Brazilian TV, his last appearance 2 nights ago. The majority of football fans today will never have watched Carlos Alberto play, but in truth, the legacy his Brazilian team left the game can be seen every Saturday on every ground right across the world.
Carlos Alberto, whose death was announced earlier today.
And finally, the antics of so-called Essex girls have for years been the subject of jokes and more recently, of course, a famously raucous TV series. But now they are fighting back against the stereotype.
Yes, 2 women from Essex are campaigning to get the term removed from the dictionary because they say it's rude and offensive. Sally Lockwood has our definitive report.
Essex, where the women are known for their fake tan, false lashes and being fabulously groomed. But look up the term Essex girl in the dictionary and it's far less complimentary. A petition is calling to have the phrase removed, something Towie star Danielle Armstrong is fully behind.
I'm very proud to be an Essex girl, and I think whoever put that in the dictionary and come to, I don't know, vote and say that this is what an Essex girl is, I think that's just complete discrimination. I think it's actually unfair.
The Oxford English Dictionary calls the phrase Essex girl a contemptuous term, describing them as unintelligent, promiscuous and materialistic, while the Collins English Dictionary has a similar definition, adding the Essex girl is devoid of taste. But one business owner here says they need to look past the fake tan.
You can go to any shop, coffee shop, anywhere in Essex, sit with a group of Essex girls. We're not like that at all.
So that's exactly what we did.
We're glamorous. We like nice bags and nice shoes and nice watches. I work really hard for all them things.
We can't tar everyone with the same brush. And I think since the programme, probably the whole country thinks that we're all stupid down here.
Towie has perhaps peddled the Essex girl stereotype, and tonight Oxford Dictionaries says the term can't be removed. Its definition, though, can be reviewed. Sally Lockwood, ITV News.
And I never thought for a moment I'd say this, but if you want to join in the debate over the phrase Essex girls, go to our website, itv.com/news, where there is even a poll on the issue.
Said it, that's all for now. Raggy Omar will be here with news at 10.
But from all of us on the Evening News, have a very good evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.